There are some things you can't unsee. My son-in-law's face when I handed him the keys to my truck so he could borrow it for the weekend. That grateful, almost humble look he had back then. And then his face 3 years later, standing in my own kitchen, telling me I was too involved and that my daughter needed space to build her own family identity. He said it like he'd rehearsed it, like someone had written it down for him on a notepad and he'd been practicing in the bathroom mirror. I didn't say anything. I just nodded, set down my coffee cup, and drove home. That was 8 months ago. A lot has changed since then. Not everything, but enough. My name is not important. What I am is a father, a grandfather, and a man who spent 41 years in commercial roofing, working my way up from carrying bundles of shingles up a ladder at 19 to owning a company that put roofs on half the schools in our county. I am 67 years old. My hands are rough. My knees ache in the cold. And I know with the certainty of a man who has watched a lot of storms roll in when something is not built to last. My daughter's marriage was not built to last. But that is not where this story starts. It starts on a Tuesday morning in October when I drove out to Kettle Creek Park just before sunrise. I had my thermos, my folding chair, and my granddaughter beside me. She is 6 years old. Her name is June. She has her mother's eyes and, I am increasingly convinced, my stubbornness. We were sitting on the bank, watching the mist come off the water. June was eating a granola bar with the focused concentration of a surgeon. She got a piece of oat on her sleeve and stopped everything to brush it off. I watched her and thought that this, right here, this ordinary moment, was the thing I had almost lost. "Grandpa," she said without looking up from her granola bar. "Yeah, Bug. Do you and Daddy not like each other?" I looked at the water. A heron was standing at the far bank, still as a garden statue. "Why do you ask that?" "Because when you come over, Daddy goes to the other room." I let that sit for a moment. 6-year-olds notice everything. They just don't have the filters yet that teach us to pretend we don't. "Your daddy and I are working some things out," I said. "Grown-up stuff. It doesn't have anything to do with you." She looked at me then, skeptical. She has always been skeptical. Does it have to do with money? I almost choked on my coffee. "Where did you hear that?" She shrugged. "Mommy cried one time and said something about money, and then she said sorry and hugged me." I set my thermos down on the grass very carefully, the way you set something down when your hands are not quite steady. "Your mommy loves you very much," I said, "and so do I. That's the part that matters." She seemed to accept that. She went back to her granola bar. I watched the heron take off low over the water, its wings barely making a sound. I had been replaying the last 3 years in my head for months, trying to find the exact moment things went wrong. You do that. You look for the crack in the foundation. You want to believe there was one moment, one decision, one wrong turn, because that means it was fixable. If you can find the crack, you can patch it. But sometimes the problem isn't one crack. Sometimes it's the whole design. My daughter. I'll call her my daughter because that is what she is. The most important thing she is. Married her husband 6 years ago. I liked him well enough at first. He was charming, quick with a joke, the kind of man who could talk to anyone at a party. I see now that I mistook ease for substance. They are not the same thing. Within a year of the wedding, the money conversation started. They were renting an apartment and wanted to buy a house. The market was difficult. They were stretched thin. My daughter called, not to ask, exactly, but in that way where the asking is built into the not asking. I'd gotten good at hearing it. I helped with the down payment. $50,000. I did not hesitate. She is my only child. I told myself that was what fathers do. Then the car? His car had transmission problems and the repairs cost more than the car was worth. I lent him $8,000. He paid back $2,200 over the next 8 months and then stopped mentioning it. Then the home renovation. The kitchen needed updating, they said. The estimate came in at $34,000. I covered half. The kitchen is beautiful. I have eaten exactly 1 meal in it since it was finished. I kept telling myself I was helping. Kept telling myself that this was investment in their stability, in June's stability. Kept telling myself a lot of things. The first time her husband told me I was too involved was at June's 4th birthday party. I had shown up early to help set up, the way I always did, the way my daughter had always expected me to. He pulled me aside by the back fence and said with that smooth, rehearsed calm of his that he and my daughter were trying to do more things on their own as a family, that they appreciated everything but they needed room. I told him I understood. I drove home and sat in my driveway for 20 minutes before going inside. I talked to my daughter that week. She said he wasn't wrong, exactly, but she wasn't sure he was right either. She sounded tired. She sounded like a woman standing in the middle of a bridge that is swaying in two directions. I gave them space, stopped dropping by unannounced, called instead of showing up, texted before I texted, kept myself at the edge of the picture, careful, quiet, watching my granddaughter grow up in photographs instead of in person. And then last February, the call came that I had been waiting for without knowing I was waiting for it. My daughter called at 11 at night. Her voice was that particular flat that comes after crying has dried up. "And you've moved past the tears into something harder and colder." She said they were in trouble. Not small trouble. The kind that doesn't get fixed without a reckoning. Her husband had lost his job 4 months earlier. He had not told her for 6 weeks. In those 6 weeks, he had burned through their savings account, paying the mortgage and keeping the lights on and maintaining the appearance of normalcy. He had also, she said, her voice going very quiet, opened 2 credit cards in her name without telling her. The total balance was a little over $19,000. I sat at my kitchen table and listened to my daughter tell me her life had been quietly disassembled while she wasn't looking. "I want to come home for a while," she said. "Me and June. I just need some time to think." "Come home?" I said. "Right now, tonight. I will make up the rooms." She and June arrived at 1 in the morning. June was asleep over my daughter's shoulder, her little sneaker hanging off one foot. I took June from her and carried her up to the guest room. My daughter stood in the kitchen and I made her tea, and she sat at the table and said nothing for a long time. Finally, she said, "I don't know when I stopped seeing it clearly." I said, "That's what they count on." I was talking about more than her husband. I was talking about the slow accumulation of small surrenders. The way you give up a little bit of your clarity at a time, trading it for peace, until one day you look around and you're not sure where you are. She stayed for 2 weeks. Those were not easy weeks. There were phone calls with lawyers and calls with the credit card companies, and one very tense afternoon when her husband came to my house uninvited and stood on my porch and told me with impressive composure for a man in his position that I was interfering in his marriage and that what happened between him and his wife was between them. I said, "The credit cards in her name are not between you and her. They're between her and the law." He left. June loved being at my house. She had her own cup on the bottom shelf of the cabinet, a pink plastic thing with a unicorn on it that she'd left here on a visit 2 years ago. She knew where I kept the extra blankets. She knew where I kept the extra blankets. She knew which step on the stairs creaked, and she stepped over it every morning like it was a game. She was at home here. That mattered to me in a way I could not fully put into words. After 2 weeks, my daughter went back. I did not try to stop her. You cannot make that decision for another person. You can be there when they're ready, and you can make sure the light is on when they need to find their way. That is all a father can do. What I could control was what happened next on my end. I drove downtown on a Thursday morning in November and sat across from my attorney, a woman I have used for 30 years, sharp as a finishing nail and twice as reliable. I told her what I wanted to do. She asked me if I was sure. I told her I was sure the way you're sure when you've had 8 months to think about something and you're done second-guessing. We were restructuring my estate. Everyone assumed they knew what I was doing. My daughter worried I was cutting her off in anger. Her husband assumed I was freezing them out to punish him. Neither was true. Anger is an inefficient building material. You can frame a wall with it if you want, but it won't hold when the weather changes. What I was doing was something different. What I was doing was building something that could actually stand. The first change was June. I established a trust in her name. Irrevocable, meaning no one, including me, could touch the principal. The trust held property and the majority of my liquid assets. June could not access it until she was 28. Not 18, not 21. 28. By 28, she will have made enough mistakes to understand money and enough good decisions to respect it. At 18, you think you're invincible. At 28, you've usually been humbled at least twice. My attorney looked at me over her glasses when I said 28. She said most people say 25. I said most people are optimists. The second change was my daughter. She is not cut off. She is not punished. She is my child, and she will always be my child, and no amount of bad decisions on her part or mine erases that. But I had spent 6 years writing checks that were erasing something else, her own capability, her own confidence, her own understanding of what she could do without a safety net. I was not helping her. I was softening the ground under her feet until she couldn't feel when she was about to fall. I set up a structure with my attorney. My daughter would receive a monthly transfer, enough to cover basic rent and a modest apartment, not a house payment, not a luxury. The transfer has one condition. She must be employed. Proof of employment, verified quarterly. If she is working, the money comes. If she is not working, the money pauses, not disappears, pauses, for 90 days to allow for transitions. After 90 days without employment, it stops until she provides proof she has started again. I thought about this for a long time. It is not punishment. It is structure. There's a difference that most people mix up. Punishment is about making someone feel bad. Structure is about building something that works. My attorney asked about the son-in-law. I said, "What about him?" She said, "What if they reconcile?" I said, "If they reconcile, she benefits from her own transfer indirectly. He does not benefit from mine. There is no provision for him anywhere in this document. None. If their marriage survives this, it will survive on what the two of them build together. My money will not be a third party in their relationship anymore. It never should have been." She nodded. She wrote it down. She did not argue. There was one more provision, a bonus of sorts. If my daughter maintained continuous employment for 4 years, not 5 because she is starting at a harder place than most and I am practical, not punishing, she would receive a lump sum sufficient for a down payment on a modest home, not a showpiece. A home. The kind with a yard and a school district and a walk to a grocery store. The kind you live in, not the kind you use to impress people at dinner parties. I signed the documents. The scratch of my pen in that quiet office felt like the sound of something being settled. My attorney closed the folder. She said, "You're a tough man, Lyle." I buttoned my jacket. "I am not tough," I said. "I am tired of watching people I love make the same mistake on a loop, because I kept making it comfortable enough to repeat." I walked out into the November afternoon. The trees along Main Street had gone bare. The sky was that particular gray that sits over the Midwest in late fall like a low ceiling. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, just breathing. I had a granddaughter to pick up from school in 2 hours. We were going to make chili tonight from scratch, with cornbread in the cast-iron skillet. June had started calling it Grandpa Chili. She had very specific opinions about the ratio of beans to meat. I had learned to defer to her on this. Some battles are not worth fighting. Chili ratios are one of them. I got in my truck and drove. My daughter called me that evening after June was in bed. The legal paperwork had been served, not to her, but filed, and she had found out through our attorney, who was also technically the trustee of June's trust. She was quiet on the phone for a long time. She said, "Are you angry at me?" "No," I said. "I am not angry at you. I was angry at myself for a while. I kept thinking about all the times I handed you a check instead of a conversation." She said, "Dad." "I know," I said. She cried a little then, not the flat, exhausted crying of February. Something different. Something that sounded like release. She said, "He opened those credit cards the same month I told him I wanted to go back to work full-time. Did I tell you that? I did not know that." She said, "I think he was afraid. I think when I said I wanted to work, he got scared that things would shift. So he created a crisis to keep everything the same." I thought about that for a long time after we hung up. Men who are afraid do strange things. They build walls out of money problems and family crises, not because they want to trap people, but because they don't know any other way to keep them close. I had done my own version of that. Not with debt, but with checks. I had kept my daughter tethered with financial need because being needed felt like being loved. I know that now. I am 67 years old and I am still learning things about myself that I should have figured out at 40. June and I made the chili. She stood on the step stool beside me and stirred with the big wooden spoon, extremely serious about it, the way she is serious about most things. She asked me if chili was hard to make. I said, not once you know the steps. She said, can I learn all the steps? She said, can I learn all the steps? I said, that's the whole point, Bug. She stirred for a while. The kitchen smelled like cumin and the old cast iron and the particular warmth of a house in November with the heat on and something cooking on the stove. There are smells that cannot be manufactured. This is one of them. Grandpa, she said. Yeah. Is Mommy going to be okay? I looked at the top of her head. Her hair was in two slightly lopsided braids that my daughter had done before work that morning. Yes, I said. She's going to be very okay. How do you know? Because she came home when she needed to. People who know how to ask for help when it counts. They figure the rest out. Your mommy is smarter than she knows right now. She'll catch up to herself. June considered this with the wooden spoon held upright like a scepter. I'm smart too, she said. You are extraordinarily smart, I said, which is why you're going to understand compound interest by the time you are 12, and no one will ever be able to pull a financial crisis over your head without you seeing it coming from 3 miles away. She did not know what compound interest was. She was 6, but she nodded like she was filing it away for later. My daughter filed for legal separation in January. It was not a surprise to anyone by then, least of all her. She got a job, a real one, not a stopgap. She is working in project management at a logistics firm in the city. She's good at it. She told me last month that she got a commendation from her department head. The first time in her adult life she had been recognized professionally for something she had done entirely on her own. She called me right after to tell me. She sounded like herself, the version of herself from before all the erosion. The son-in-law has moved out. He is living somewhere on the east side of the city. I do not know the details and I do not need them. He has made no attempt to reconcile, which tells me what I already suspected. The marriage was an arrangement of convenience, and when the convenience ran out, so did he. My daughter will survive this. She already is. June is in 1st grade. She loves her teacher. She has a best friend, named something I can never spell correctly, who teaches her things about playground politics that I find fascinating and slightly alarming. She still comes to my house on Tuesday afternoons and we do whatever project she has decided on that week. Last week we repotted her mother's spider plant that had gotten too big for its pot. The week before we made a volcano for her class out of baking soda and dish soap and red food coloring. The week before that, I taught her how to use a level. She was very interested in the bubble. She likes knowing how things work. She asks why more than any human being I have ever encountered. I answer every question I can, and when I can't, I look it up with her. I figure that is the right response. Better to say I don't know, let's find out together, than to bluff and have her spend her whole life believing things that aren't true because some adult told her with confidence. I think about my daughter's ex-husband sometimes. I try not to sit in judgment. He is a man who learned somewhere along the way that performance was more valuable than substance, that appearance was more important than integrity, and nobody corrected him until life did. That is not entirely his fault, but it is entirely his responsibility. There is a difference. I think about the money sometimes, too. The $50,000 for the down payment, the $8,000 for the truck, the $17,000 for the renovation, the dozens of smaller checks in between. If I sat down and added it up, the number would be significant. I do not add it up. It is not useful. What I know is this: money can buy a lot of things. It can buy comfort and convenience and the appearance of stability. What it cannot buy is character. It cannot buy the specific kind of confidence that comes from doing hard things and not falling apart. You build that yourself, over time, the way you build anything real, slowly, imperfectly, with your own hands. My daughter is building that now. I watch her and I see it happening. She is tired sometimes in the way that is actually good. The way you're tired at the end of a day where you did real work. Her shoulders are different. She stands different. She is remembering something about herself that she had set down somewhere along the way. June will know that story when she is old enough. I am going to make sure of it. Not the version with winners and losers. Not the cautionary tale version with a villain. The honest version, the one where everyone made mistakes, including her grandfather, and some of those mistakes cost real things. And still, the people who are still standing found their feet. The trust will be there when June turns 28. Whatever she does by then, whatever she has learned and built and lost and rebuilt, she will receive that inheritance not as a windfall, but as a confirmation. As the financial version of someone saying, "We believed in you before you fully believed in yourself. We were just patient enough to wait until you were ready." That is what I hope anyway. I am 67. My knees hurt in November. I wake up at 5:30 regardless of alarm or intention. My truck has 212,000 miles on it, and I have no interest in replacing it because every mile on that truck is a mile I drove to something that mattered. I drink my coffee black, and I make my chili from scratch, and I have a granddaughter who argues with me about bean ratios and asks me why about everything, and stands on a step stool in my kitchen and stirs things with the gravity of someone who knows the stirring is important. I think sometimes about what I would say to myself 20 years ago. The version of me who thought love was measured in what you were willing to give, in how much you could absorb, in how long you could stand at the edge of someone else's problem and hold it up. I would say, you're not helping. You think you are, but you're not. Love is not the same thing as rescue. Let them build, let them fall, let them stand back up. Be there when they need a hand, but stop carrying the whole weight. You'll hurt your back, and worse, you'll teach them that someone else's back is theirs to use whenever they need it. I would say the hardest thing a parent can do is trust that the child they raised has what they need inside them already. You can believe in someone without subsidizing them. Those are different things. Learn the difference before it costs you. I would say your granddaughter is going to teach you things about patience that you have not yet imagined. Pay attention. She's going to need you present, not just available. I did not know those things at 47. I am still learning them at 67. Maybe that is the whole point. Maybe that is the thing nobody tells you about getting older. It's not that you arrive somewhere. It's that you just keep getting more honest about where you actually are. June called the chili Grandpa chili for the first time on a Wednesday. She said it like it was already a proper noun, like it was already a thing with a name and a history, like it had always been called that, and she was just the one who finally said it out loud. I did not make a big deal about it. I just served her a bowl and sat down across from her at my kitchen table and listened to her tell me about the argument she and her best friend had at recess about whether dolphins were smarter than dogs, and I thought that this right here, is what I bought. Not the chili, not the table, not even the 8 months of sleepless nights and legal fees and long drives and longer silences. I bought this. The ordinary Tuesday. The ordinary question. The ordinary bowl of something warm on a cold night with someone small who trusts me completely and has no idea what that is worth. It is worth everything. I know that now. I should have known it earlier. But I know it now, and for a man my age, now is plenty. I have been thinking a lot lately about the difference between cause and effect, not in a theoretical way, in the way you think about it when you're sitting at your kitchen table at 5 in the morning, and you're replaying 3 years of decisions, and you can see, clearly now, exactly how one thing led to the next. Every check I wrote had a consequence I didn't see coming, not because I was blind exactly, because I was looking at the wrong thing. I was looking at the immediate problem, the down payment, the car, the renovation, and telling myself I was solving it. I wasn't solving anything. I was postponing it, and every time I postponed it, I made the eventual reckoning harder. For my daughter, for myself. Derek didn't become who we became in a vacuum. A man who opens credit cards in his wife's name without telling her is a man who learns somewhere that other people's resources exist for his use. I contributed to that lesson, not intentionally, but I did. Every time I covered a shortfall without a conversation, I confirmed to everyone in that house that money appears when things get difficult, that someone will always catch you, that the floor is softer than it looks. The floor was not soft. It was never soft. I just kept putting rugs over it. What I know now, what I wish I had understood 20 years earlier, is that real support and comfortable rescue are two completely different things, and we dress them up in the same word because it's easier than examining what we're actually doing. I was not supporting my daughter when I wrote those checks. I was managing my own discomfort. It hurt me to see her struggle, so I removed the struggle. And in removing the struggle, I removed the very thing that would have made her stronger before any of this happened. June asked me once how you know if something is built right. We were working on that volcano project, pressing the papier-mâché into shape, and she asked it the way she asks most things. Directly, without preamble, like the question had been sitting in her mouth waiting for the right moment. I told her, you shake it. If it holds, it's built right. If it falls apart, you learn something, and you build it again. She thought about that. Then she shook the volcano. It held. That is the only honest measure of anything. Not how it looks, not what it cost, whether it holds when you shake it. My daughter is being shaken right now. She knows it. She is not asking me to stop the shaking. She is asking me to be there when she needs to remember that she is capable of holding. That is a different thing entirely, and it took me far too long to understand the distinction. I think about Lyle at 47. The version of me who thought love was measured in what you were willing to absorb on someone else's behalf. I would tell him, you are teaching people how to need you, and you are mistaking that for being loved. Stop. Let them build their own floor. Let them test it. Let them fail and rebuild. Be the person they call when they want to share the victory, not the person they call because there's no other option. Integrity is not built in the easy moments. It is built in the Tuesday afternoons when you do the right thing and nobody is watching and it costs you something real. Rachel is building it now. June will watch her mother do it, and she will carry that forward. That is the only inheritance that actually compounds. I bought a level yesterday. I'm going to teach June how to use it properly this week. You hold it against the surface, you look at the bubble, and you make adjustments until it sits exactly where it should. Patient, small, honest adjustments. That is how you build anything worth keeping.